Doing everyone. Hope you're having a good day. Sunny and dry here. Somewhat cold this morning, but good day all overall. So hope your weather's good where you are. Um, so Monday we were talking about a funny little passage of scripture where Jesus rebukes one group for being unbelieving, and then he rebukes his disciples for having little faith, and his answer is to tell them what they really needed was a little faith. And that last part can be kind of really confusing. You were wrong to have little faith because what you really needed was little faith. So I've been thinking about that and the nature of faith and what is faith all about. And we're going to look at a couple passages, but I do want to remind you of something that a few series ago, I forget what the series was, but uh, I emphasized the fact that faith is two things coupled together. One is believing something to be true, and almost always that something is about God, but then trusting ourselves into God's hands based on that belief. And you need both those things. Some people entrust themselves to God, but they don't really believe certain things about God. In fact, we're going to see that in our story today. Other people believe things about God, but they don't take the step of actively trusting of God for those things. So let's take a quick look back at our story in Matthew chapter 17. This is a very uh, as it starts, it's a very sad story about a man who had a son who was having seizures and convulsions. And it doesn't say it, but we know from other passages, nobody could heal him. The doctors of the day couldn't heal him. His own disciples couldn't heal him. And what was actually happening was there was a demon that was bothering the boy. Some people call that demon possession. Some people call it demon oppression, whatever it is. I want to say this real quick. This is not the main point to today's story, but we are not saying that everybody that has seizures or convulsions has a demon causing it. Sometimes it's just a medical issue that the medical field needs to deal with. However, some seizures are because of demons. And if we only deal with them as a medical issue, in that case, and don't deal with them from the spiritual end, you will be frustrated in the results that you're trying to achieve. That's an aside. So you have your unbelieving people up here in verse 17. You have his disciples being rebuked for little faith. And then finally, you have, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. That is what Jesus is trying to drive them to. You can say from now on to a mountain, and this is speaking not literally, but figuratively, move from here to there, and it will move, for nothing will be impossible with you. I want to look at this real quickly from Mark chapter 9. Same story, but it emphasizes some different people in the story, namely the Father this time. In the first one we looked at, it was the crowds and the religious teachers that Jesus initially rebuked for their unbelief. In both cases, the disciples of Jesus, likely the ones who went on to become the apostles that we're most familiar with, were rebuked for their little faith. But there's a number of things we can learn. So Jesus is asking the father, the boy's father, how long has he been like this? And the boy's father says, from childhood, he answered. Now remember, this is the guy that thought enough of Jesus to bring his son to Jesus. He had a kind of faith. But as we're going to see in a second, it wasn't the kind of faith that Jesus was looking for. It has often thrown him, the boy, into a fire or water to kill him. So, I mean, just feel the emotional anguish that these parents went through trying to deal with a boy that has troubles that nobody seems to be able to help with. So good on him for bringing the boy to Jesus. But there's a problem, and I've highlighted it in yellow. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Now remember what I said. Faith is actually coupling two things together. Belief in something about God with active trust. This man is doing the active trust thing because he took the time to bring the boy to Jesus. What he's lacking is the belief side of things because he says to Jesus, if you can. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you have the ability to. I'm taking a shot at it, Jesus, if you can do this. And Jesus picked up on that right away in his answer to the Father. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for him who believes. That's the first part of faith that I was telling you about. Everything is possible for the one who believes, in this case, who believes that Jesus can do it, or that believes that God the Father can do whatever the situation is that we're bringing to him. Do you and do I believe that God can do that? That's step one. Immediately, the father felt convicted by that, and he realized what he had done, and his approach was wrong. He says, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Faith is not always perfect. Faith is sometimes a process where we ask God for help. Ephesians chapter 2 seems to indicate that faith itself is a gift from God. He helps us to believe if we cry out to him. And that's what the boy's father is doing. I do believe, but my belief is imperfect. It's not the way I recognize it's not the way it should be. So help me in my unbelief. Now, that's lesson number one. Lesson number two, actually number three, maybe. After Jesus has gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out, the demon? If you remember up here, then the disciples came to Jesus in private. This is Matthew's version, and all these things did happen. This is not a conflict. They're just reporting on different aspects of the story differently. Why couldn't we drive it out? And Jesus replied, because you have so little faith. Because you have so little faith. Keep that. Come back down here to Mark chapter 9. Why couldn't we drive it out? This kind only comes out by prayer. The little faith, in this case by the disciples, actually showed itself by a lack of prayer. It's great to believe that God can do things. Do you actually talk to him about it? There's a verse in the Bible that says, you have not because you ask not. So faith has kind of three components to it now. It's believing something about God, that we believe this is true about God. Secondly, it's now putting myself in a place of trusting God with my stuff, whether it's my child that's sick or something going on in my own life, whatever it is. I believe this about God. I'm now going to entrust myself to God. And finally, I am going to express that by talking to God about this. Three legs of a stool: belief, trust, and prayer. The three legs of the stool of true faith. Even if it's a little bit of faith, God will honor this kind of faith. I just want to finish up by reminding you of some uh, really well-known verses in Hebrews chapter 11, just to encourage your hearts. Final note here today as we finish up. Hebrews 11 is the great faith chapter, and it gives us all kinds of examples of what faith looked like in action. But it starts by saying this. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. I believe that God can do. I haven't seen it yet, but I believe that God can do it. I'm going to leave it in his hands. And secondly, for by it, the people of old received their commendation. They often didn't actually see the answer to the prayer that they hoped for, but they still believed God that he could do it. Because without faith, it's impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists, something about God, and that he rewards those who seek him. I'm now trusting myself to God. He's going to do something on my behalf. I believe this about God, and he's going to do this on my behalf. That's the two sides of the coin. I thought we would have time, but we're not. We're going to come back to this, Lord willing, on Friday. This is the story of the centurion who had a sick servant, a servant who was sick, who needed Jesus' healing. And we want to learn something about faith from that. But it's all about the little bit of the right kind of faith in God. You don't have to be a grand hero of the faith. You need to have the right kind of faith communicated to God in the right way, and God will act on our behalf. That's my word for today. I hope it encourages your heart. And Lord willing, I look forward to seeing you all on Friday.